This case is about providing an opportunity for fair trade for the Minnesota apple growers regionally and locally. Last fall, the University of Minnesota and Pepin Heights released the new apple called the SweeTango. The SweeTango has been developed by the University of Minnesota, and the University of Minnesota gave an exclusive right to license this apple to one orchard in Minnesota, not allowing us other growers to sell and market this apple like we have for years. The problem for the University of Minnesota to sell an exclusive license agreement is that they are a publicly funded land-grant university, and they are using taxpayer money to fund the research and development of their new ideas and products, including apple breeding. Awarding the sales and marketing to Pepin Heights is contrary to the principles of how the University of Minnesota has its own written policies on how to handle new technology, including plant and plant material. And basically there's two principles, very simple. The first principle is that it has to benefit Minnesotans and Minnesota taxpayers. And secondly, obviously the university needs to be reimbursed for its expenses in doing this, but they can't do it in a way or be reimbursed in a way that violates the first principle, and that is to benefit Minnesotans. The exclusive licensing agreement between Pepin Heights and the University of Minnesota eliminates fair trade for Minnesota apple growers. We believe that the agreement eliminates fair trade, and this is why. First, each orchard is allowed up to 1,000 trees if they sign the agreement with Pepin Heights. There are over 180 orchards, apple growers in the state of Minnesota, but there are only 50,000 trees allotted for this program. Easy to do the math, and that is, if there's 180 growers and only 50,000 trees, not everybody's even going to be able to get all the trees that they want under this agreement. Secondly, we are not allowed to combine the apples. So if I'm a grower and I'm selling to a store and I don't have enough and the store wants more, I can't go and buy other apples from my neighboring apple grower. Third, the agreement with Pepin Heights does not allow us to sell outside the borders of Minnesota. Many of us do sell to apple orchards in Wisconsin, Iowa, Nebraska, and so that has been eliminated. Again, not allowing fair trade. The final issue that we have a hard time with under this contract with Pepin Heights is that if Pepin Heights believes that we have done something that they do not believe fits underneath the contract, they can come in and remove the apple trees from our orchards without us having any recourse whatsoever. The exclusive licensing agreement between Pepin Heights and the University of Minnesota was pretty much done, in our opinion, in secrecy and negotiated and signed without our knowledge. It wasn't until the announcement was made to the Minnesota apple growers that we really had any awareness of what was going on or what had already happened. After the announcement was made about the licensing agreement with Pepin Heights, there was a small group of Minnesota growers that got together and approached the University of Minnesota to try to talk about what had been already done. It kind of fell on deaf ears at that point, so they reached out to their state legislators. And at that point, there was a meeting held between the University of Minnesota, Pepin Heights, and this small group of growers. Again, another meeting happening with not everybody's knowledge. And at this meeting, it was decided that a task force be set up through session law of the Minnesota state legislators. The Plant License Task Force was to investigate and report back to the state on the impact this particular license agreement would have on the local apple industry. The question us apple growers continually ask is whether or not the Plant Task Force truly investigated the impact this particular license agreement with Pepin Heights would have on our industry. We believe not. And incidentally, it's important to note that the director or chairman of this task force was a representative or director of the University of Minnesota. The only conclusion we've gotten from them was a statement that all concerns have been resolved in regards to SweeTango. Again, we don't believe so. There's another very interesting point in regards to the Plant License Task Force, and that is they have done more to deal with future releases of this sort than deal with the problem at hand. And that is what has made us question their total investigation into how this impacted the apple growers of Minnesota. Our conclusion really is based on the recommendations by the Plant Task Force. And those recommendations going forward are that they will deal with Minnesota growers, Minnesota companies, that a licensee will work with Minnesota growers as a whole. Interesting enough, great solutions, but again, doesn't solve the problem at hand. We are pursuing this case to try to level the playing field, to bring back fair trade the way it always has been. It's important to remember, too, and we can't lose sight of this, that Minnesota tax dollars paid for the development of this plant material, which has been now given exclusively to Pepin Heights. Minnesota apple growers have already experienced damages due to the licensing agreement with Pepin Heights and the University of Minnesota. There are really two areas of damages that we've already experienced and will continue to experience. The consequence of the SweeTango being released in the fall of 2009 has already caused some Minnesota apple growers to lose their wholesale accounts because they were unable to supply the SweeTango. The second area of damages will be the damages incurred based on how much time it takes to get back to fair trade. I mean, we're asking for fair trade like it always has been in the Minnesota apple growers industry. And the issue there is that you don't just plant a tree and harvest the following season. You plant a tree and harvest your first crop in 5 to 6 years. The Minnesota Apple Growers for Fair Trade really has one goal, and that is to continue to provide a great selection, great quality, and fair price to the wonderful Minnesota consumers that we've been growing and selling to for over the last 100 years. In order to do this, we need to be assured that we will have equal access to all present and future apples that the University of Minnesota may develop for us. And it's important that we have a legal determination on how this will be handled in the future.